So I'm now joined by Rebecca Vincent, Director of Campaigns at Reporters Without Borders. Rebecca, what is at stake over these two-day hearings?
Well, what is at stake this week is also what's at stake in the broader case against Julian Assange, which is global journalism and press freedom. And that sounds quite extreme, but we really believe that the implications of this case could be extremely damaging for journalists everywhere. It's because he's the first publisher that is being pursued in this way that the precedent could be set that would then actually apply to any journalist, any media organization, really anybody who publishes stories based on leaked information, which is a normal journalistic practice. So if the US succeeds in getting the UK to hand him over and to put him on trial there, a can of worms will be opened that cannot be reined back in. And so we would call on the British judicial system to deliver some form of justice this week. But if that doesn't happen, it is still a political case. A political solution still could be the way out of this. And our main call still remains on the US government directly to drop these charges and to close this case and put a stop to this endless legal harassment of Julian Assange.
And I know Reporters Without Borders obviously do a lot of these global journalist cases, and I believe that you've commented that the Julian Assange case has been one of the most difficult for you guys to observe, for you to get the correct court access, for you to deal with the appropriate bodies. Could you talk a little bit about how difficult that's been?
Yes, basically every time we've kind of brushed up against the British system, we've had problems in a way that my colleagues and I haven't faced in other countries and other cases. In fact, this is the first court hearing and 4 years of extradition proceedings where I was accredited by the court as an NGO observer and allowed in without hassle. And I think the only reason it was smooth this time is because of that history of fighting, and I pushed them quite hard very early, to be honest, but we could never fully trust it because there's been so many problems in the past. In the previous hearings, in particular during the pandemic, we had so many problems getting in. We were often forced to queue for the public gallery, but so few spaces were made available that made it really difficult. We never knew if we were going to be able to do our jobs. Sometimes I personally queued for 5 or 6 hours in the freezing cold. At one point was threatened with arrest. That was during the pandemic, just for trying to do my job and get into court. So that has been absurd. It's also the case at Belmarsh Prison, I have to say. So that's different parts of the British system here. But we were barred access when we had a visit vetted and scheduled last April to visit Julian in Belmarsh Prison. And it was quite difficult to get to that stage because, of course, he wasn't allowed visitors for at least, I think, a 2-year period during the pandemic. It took months to vet us. We finally had a visit scheduled. We turned up to Belmarsh, followed all the rules, and were told actually that the prison had quote-unquote received intelligence that we were journalists and therefore would not be allowed in. They had no understanding for the role of an NGO. It took months of fighting. We finally got in, but they then tried to impose some conditions on our communications around the visits, which we have finally spoken out about because that shouldn't be the case. But there seems to be something every time we're engaging with the UK authorities that's not quite normal about this case, and it really isn't a good look.
And just finally, your impressions of the day from being inside the court. How did you find the judges? How did they listen to the evidence? Did it feel positive, potentially, for getting a hearing?
I think that the arguments made by the defense today were quite compelling, and the issues raised certainly merit full consideration in a proper hearing. It was really refreshing to be back on the broader substance of the case because for the past 3 years, proceedings became more and more narrowly focused only on mental health issues or prison conditions in the US. So today we heard arguments again on the political nature of the case, the fact that that this is the first time that journalistic activity has been targeted this way by the Espionage Act. We heard for the first time really in court about the shocking CIA assassination plot against Assange, and that's one of those things that if it were any other case, I think would have drew a far stronger reaction than it did, but somehow it gets dismissed here. It deserves examination by a court. So what I walk away from today saying very much is we need a full hearing. So tomorrow we'll hear the other side of the story, and I'm sure we'll have some reactions to that as well. But this doesn't merit just a 2-day sort of quick overview. It merits proper consideration. And I still hope that justice will somehow be possible at this late stage in this country. But if not, these arguments seem very strong if they're taken to the European Court of Human Rights.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca.